Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at tsf.tech. So welcome to episode 17 now of From the Factory Floor, and our first of 2021. So we've got the gang back from the first episode of 2020. So obviously welcome Ian and Guy. Today's episode is all about non-execs. Ian, Guy, I don't know if you want to just give a very quick overview of what you've done as non-execs in the past, really.
This is quite a special podcast, I think, for me and Guy, because this is how our relationship started a decade ago. I kind of rocked up on the front doorstep at Cake Solutions, gave Guy a bit of help with the heavy lifting, and since then, really, we've enjoyed each other's company tremendously, bounced off each other, and enjoyed some mutual success, and that led us to being the co-founders of the Startup Factory. So, yeah, it was my first proper non-exec post, and I'd like to think it's been a success because the personal side of it has been as important to me and Guy as the business side.
We're going to cover off some of the benefits of a non-exec, but since you've kind of mentioned one there, Ian, the getting on bit is the single most important thing, because you have to respect each other, you have to be able to get on, and we've had that in spades, and right from the word go, you know, we've got common interests and common outlook on life and running a business, and I think that's a really, really important starting point. Everything else kind of follows on from there, really. So yeah, I'd echo that. And it's funny, really, because, you know, you came in and supported me in many ways, which I'm going to talk about later. You know, it's kind of come full circle, really, because, you know, we had some success at Cake. Then, you know, I've started on my new career, and my new career involves 2 or 3 companies that I've kind of co-founded, and I'm either working on now or rolling out, as well as a couple of non-exec positions. So it's like full circle, really. And I'm really new into that, and you're an old hand at it, really.
Hey, that's the old hand, but at least you didn't say veteran. But there you go. For me, it was a natural evolution of what I wanted to do. I'd kind of done the day job for a long time, you know, with the PLC, had my own consultancy business, and what I was missing really was that emotional connection with a business and sharing the founder journey, the highs and lows, but also that kind of that buddy and being that business buddy relationship. Because I think being a kind of consultant and doing consultancy is great. You can have an impact, you're a catalyst. But non-exec, they're much more long-term, and it's more about the relationship. It's not a quick fix panacea, someone who rocks up with all the answers. I think the reason we work really well, guys, I kind of came in, but you were great in terms of you kind of listened, we replayed back, we talked about options, and then I got out of the way. You went on and did it. And so I think it was the frictionless aspect of how we got on, of respect and trust, and kind of iterated on the discussions, really, that worked really well.
I think when you came in, you had an immediate impact in a number of areas, and then after that, actually, it was an ongoing support kind of relationship, really, that we had that worked on a number of different levels. So, you know, I think if you pick the right non-exec that has the badges and scars, then they will make an immediate impact in areas maybe you as a CEO are not experienced in, or not as strong at, or it's not your area of expertise. But then there is that ongoing support, and a lot of it actually is quite frankly mental support, because, you know, one of the points I was going to make is that running a company can get quite lonely. You know, you've got people you work really closely with, but the reality is that although people might question you to a point, no one really questions you, and no one really says, hang on a second, Guy, what on earth are you doing? Why are you doing that? You know, on the whole, people are a little bit more subtle and ask maybe softer questions and so on. And I think a non-exec who you have that kind of relationship that we had is that you could come in and ask the hard-hitting questions without fear of offence, and it would be taken in the right way, and that kind of worked both ways really well.
Also, that ability to ask the probing questions in a way that's not quite so fluffy. What other qualities would you really expect from a non-exec?
Well, interestingly, I mean, Ian didn't actually come with any experience in the area that we, you know, operated in, which was software development. But, you know, immediately you're a detail person, Ian, and I'm not, and immediately we were researching the bejesus out of everything, and and actually became far more proficient in that area and far quicker than I probably did, because I really had no experience in it when I started the business. Actually, it was my business partner that had that kind of experience, and my job was to run the business and to generate the sales, and that's how it worked. And I had to learn along the way, but you learn really quickly because of your eye for detail and your research capabilities. And I don't have that, Gene, I don't think. The biggest thing is you've got to get on. They don't have to be from your sector, but they definitely do have to have the badges and scars of running a business. The relationship has to be such that those probing, not necessarily awkward, but certainly hard-hitting questions can be asked, and everything's done in the right spirit. And again, I think your skill set filled in an area that I still really don't like that much, which was the detail work around the finances. I remember the first thing you did was came in and you looked at the information we were getting in terms of the management accounts, and you questioned that and you improved those. They needed fine tuning. We actually had reasonable management accounts, but you improved them and you fine tuned them. And then, as I recall, you what I call professionalized us a little bit more. So we had processes in place for software development and so on, but things like board meetings and board meeting minutes and agendas and quarterly strategy reviews were pretty ad hoc. We had them, but they weren't as rigorous and as professional as we should have had them. And you kind of came in with the experience of running boards and sitting on boards, and you understood how those things worked, and you professionalized us from that perspective, and that was really helpful. So when we were eventually acquired sort of 6 years after you joined us, then we had all that documentation, and the due diligence actually was a breeze, and the acquirers actually commented on what a well-run company we were, because we had all the financial disciplines in place, because we had all the way you run the company, the structures you need to have in place. And that's something I've definitely taken away, and something that with the companies I'm working with, I make sure that happens in those companies now as well. So it's a little bit more than the badges and scars. I think that's something different, actually, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But it is, you definitely professionalised us. With there when I needed to be questioned, and when I needed to ask opinions that I didn't really want to ask people in the team those opinions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary, Guy. In terms of the qualities, and I look at kind of what it's a bit of a personal introspection, really. But I guess I've always kind of viewed the non-exec role as a critical friend. You've got to respect. You've got to let the founder, CEO, get on and run the business and make the decisions. And you're just there to kind of present options and say, look, we can improve things a little bit. Where does the business want to be? Okay, let's work backwards from that. What things do we need to put in place, really? I kind of say choose a non-exec like you choose a spouse. You look for a degree of compatibility, good connectivity and some compassion. And let's leave it there on that analogy. But you know what I mean? I think there has to be that spark of personal alignment, but also then kind of respect, and then the adjacency of the experience where you get 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of the leadership and management capability and momentum that it gives. And all I'll say, guys, I think you had a brilliant platform and you knew where you wanted to go. I just kind of defogged it a little bit, encourage you to put your foot down on the accelerator. Although at times you didn't need much encouragement to do that, but just kind of put some guidance and kind of just sense checks a few things. So the qualities, as we've said, are all about personal relationship, but don't look to the non-exec to kind of come in and be a panacea. I think the way we worked, that wasn't the case. I knew very little about software development, and I think I got a reputation for being a clumsy user of the tech anyway, my time with you there.
The Brookes' infrastructure, as I recall.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it kind of takes us on to the second point about you can only use a non-exec if you're willing to listen to them, and the psychology of I'm willing to take advice. And you were great to work with, because we just sat there over a cup of tea, talked about the business, talked about aspirations, talked about frustrations, but you had a clear vision, and I just kind of helped lift the burden a little bit, I think.
Just going back, slightly rewinding, I think a Tinder for non-execs would be a momentous idea.
Yeah, and for me, it's kind of not regarding non-exec as a silver bullet. Someone who walks in has got all the answers. I think the way we work really well, guys, that you were prepared to listen hugely and take on board the advice and explore the options.
One of the things you did, you question things, And even though you probably knew they were the right moves, you questioned, because what that did, I'm quite impulsive. And I think, this is where matching the right non-exec with the right CEO is important. I'm quite impulsive and I make quick decisions, and I'm too impulsive and I don't do enough research into things. I go on gut feel too much, kind of know that. And I think Ian was not quite the opposite of that, but he certainly put that in check slightly and got me to think about things in a little bit more detail before we actually embarked on them. And I think the other thing, the acceptance advice is one thing, but actually, an important aspect for a non-exec is that sometimes the CEO will go, do you know what? I actually think I'm right. I'm going to go down that route anyway. Appreciate your advice and your thoughts on it, but in this instance, I'm going to go with what I think. The ability to be able to have that, honest conversation with the non-exec is really important.
That fit of you continuing to make the decisions, but just having it having bounced it off and either reaffirmed it or, I always worked on the basis of logic. And while you were and are an impulsive decision maker, that's a key strength. Trusting your instincts of any founder in a business is kind of navigating that way. Don't go for analysis paralysis. I think it was just acting as a sounding board that validated your thinking, or I couldn't convince you otherwise. If I'm honest, I think 9 times out of 10 that worked really well.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and I think when you did query things and you queried them strongly, then I think probably 9 times out of 10 I went, yeah, do you know what? You're right. We need to either do a little bit more research on that before we start it, or we just need to bin the idea totally because it was just a really wacky kind of magic fairy dust type of idea. There was the odd one that I kind of stuck to my guns with, on the whole. I think they worked out. So, but it gets you to sense check and think about the decisions you're making. And for my personality, that was really important and very valuable.
One of the things where you were too nice was on pricing. So when I started to understand and learn about the business, the value that you personally and the Cake as a business were providing for clients was fabulous, but you were seriously underpriced. And because you're such a humble bloke, you found it quite difficult to really look at that. But I'd like to think that was one of the key prods I gave you from a commercial point of view, is respect yourself, respect the value you're providing, look at your competition. And that, I think, did have a catalytic effect on the overall revenue and growth of the business.
I think that's a really important point. It had a massive effect on the bottom line. And quite frankly, I think a lot of CEOs will have this conversation with themselves as to what they're worth. And the big fear, I think, for any CEO, particularly when things are a little bit tighter and you really don't want to lose a customer, is the fear of putting your prices up because you think that they will suddenly disappear and not pay the money. Now, there is a chance that will happen. But actually, my experience is that when we put our prices up, and actually in over a 4-year period, I think we ended up doubling our day rates with the appropriate nudges from you. We didn't lose one client because of that, in my opinion. There's a little bit of subjectivity in there. No one pushed back. And when we quoted for new projects in particular, we were carrying on winning them at a very high rate in terms of the number of proposals we sent compared to the number of things that we won. It was like 75%. We won 75% of the business we put proposals out for, even with the prices a lot higher. And in some ways, having that higher price, it's almost reassuring for some clients, quite frankly. I think if your price is too low and you really are undervaluing yourself, they'll query, well, these guys are no good, So there's a bit of reverse psychology in there as well, I think. We were reassuringly expensive, I think the phrase is that we used.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That the whole process of software development, how you provide value to a client, all the aspects of that. But the pricing was just a blind spot. And I think blind spots are some things where non-exec can really help.
Yeah.
Day to day, you're running the business, you're doing everything, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the hiring, you're doing the account management, you're doing the numbers, and you just have that blind spot. And I think that for me is kind of, if you, as a founder, CEO, just reflect a little bit. Where are your blind spots, and where can you get a non-exec to provide some help? So I think it worked, and it was that kind of drop in helicopter view, right? Point of detail. We need to change this, and working on the impact. And I think also the benefit to you, I think it also helped you then with kind of my role and kind of the impact on the broader management team as well. Again, kind of gave you more confidence about what you were doing. And I certainly saw you becoming even more energized and focused on what you wanted to do, because I was giving you something of an anchor to enable you to then really get in with Annie and Pete and Jan and really press the button on the accelerator mode as well. So it's not just the impact the non-exec has on the founder, but on the broader management team as well.
Yeah, it absolutely gave everyone confidence, and just kind of to add to that comment a little bit there. So, as with all businesses, we had our ups and downs, and even like the majority of the period you were with us in was a successful period, but there was at least one period during your tenure that quite frankly we were running out of work. We were running it, and we were financially getting really quite tight, and so on. And that is in particular a really lonely place for a CEO, because you've had a few years of success, you've grown, you've got higher overheads. Maybe previously as a CEO, you could have stuck a little bit of your own money in and propped the company up. Now the figures were such that you couldn't touch the sides with that, so you had to make sure that the business was stable enough to withstand the ups and downs that invariably happen, often through stuff that's of no fault of your own, whether it's 2008 recession or more recently the more topical one would be the pandemic. And a non-exec quite often has been through those periods themselves, and it's just that reassurance, Guy, I've been there, I've done it, but we got over it, and you can get over it as well. And, maybe these are some of the things we could do to try and increase the business. And you kind of, you instill that positive mindset, which allows you to carry on going and not get overawed by everything that's happening, and keep planning forward and taking your team forward with you. Because, as much as we were transparent and we wanted to be quite honest with the team, and when things were good, we shared that with people, and when great things were happening and we were winning great contracts, we were quite open as a company. Equally, when they were bad, we shared it with people. But when you do that, you've got to be careful, because you don't want then people going, well, company's struggling, I'm going to look for a new job. You need your team at that point. You want people with you. So at that point, then you have to have a plan. And again, you were there for me to help me devise that plan and speak with confidence then to not just the management team, the directors, the senior management team, and then the wider team as well, and project that confidence. Yes, things are tight, but we have a plan. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Fortunately, that worked. And then one other point I just add to that is then, how do you guard against that happening again and again? I think we work together on that. How do you make sure that you build capital up and you've got plenty of cash in your bank account? Do you need a facility? Do you need to negotiate a facility? We went to a funding agency and got a facility, so that at any one point, if we didn't take any money for 6 months, we were still had enough money available to keep us going. We were well capitalized at that point to ensure that we didn't go through what we went through, I think probably when you first kind of joined us and started working with us. So that was incredibly helpful as well.
It is. There's the highs and the lows, isn't there? I think there's a couple of points there, Guy. I think being comfortable with your own vulnerability made it easy for me to work with you. You were happy to share the things that were kind of concerning you. And very quickly, we kind of formed a good trusting relationship. So, how you get your best out of a non-exec is by being prepared to show your vulnerability, while being robust to the rest of the company. Back to your point about it being lonely, having that vulnerability with your non-exec, I think is really valuable. The other thing as well is just the overall point about experience is, and I've learned this, as a good non-exec, don't just come in and try and fit your own experience into the situation. Yes, I had a lot of relevant experience, but it had to be fine-tuned and, curated to actually fit the circumstances of Cake, where it was in its growth cycle, where you were. So, non-execs don't just come in and say, yeah, I've seen this all before, this is what I've done, this worked. That isn't really a great formula, because what you want to do, as you've identified, Guy, is pass on some of those learning lessons so the CEO can actually learn from you if it happens again, this is what I need to do. So there's a personal learning journey aspect to the non-exec, but also be very careful as a non-exec. Don't just say, I know what to do, I've been here before. That's just not the case. Every situation is different and unique.
You have to adapt it. I totally get that. And you clearly did that.
Yeah, and I think we were candid with each other. I think we focused on the things that needed to be done. And I think that's another key takeaway for me, is don't just have a non-exec that rocks up and kind of you've got a name or someone who's got credibility. A good non-exec rolls their sleeves up and gets their hands dirty, but doesn't get in the way. I think, that spirit of welcoming me, making me feel involved, going to the Christmas parties, for goodness sake, was great, because I was this fella that turned up once a week, and eventually I got to know all the team and the Christmas parties and the five-a-sides. So that for me is that sense of emotional involvement is something you should look for from a non-exec, and as a non-exec, you should want that emotional involvement. Get to know the people, get to know the culture, get to know the dynamics, get to know the confident people, the shy people, because you can add value by just saying, "Hey, I just noticed, Frank's being quieter than normal. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've just spotted this." So, using that overall, your holistic experience as a non-exec, but equally focusing on the things that matter and not getting in the way.
Building a relationship with the wider team was really important, because one of the other things that you did, talking of kind of rolling your sleeves up, was that you began to mentor other members of the team as well. So we worked in a technical environment, and often in those environments, people don't always have the social skills that other people have, kind of thing. And without being too stereotypical, but you were there and you provided soft skill support for people, so they could improve that for those that needed it, for that side of for that side of their character. And it was not something that came naturally, but you kind of showed them the way, and they became more confident of it. And I think one of the things that, between us and the management team, we did pretty well at Kate, was we developed people. I saw people that came in as, really shy, very mild-mannered people that when I left were team leads and had a voice and had an opinion, and it was great to see people develop in that way. And certainly things like the soft skill training were kind of part of that journey, and the exposure we had with clients and that kind of thing also helped. And I suppose the culture, the technical that we developed, where the technical team kind of shared stuff, and there was, you could do a lunch and learn if you wanted. It's a really soft way of going in, learning your communication skills to other people, because you're doing it to your peers. So, you kind of know them. It's not as scary. But then when you've done that a few times, then, you might go to a user group and do a talk there. You might go to a conference and do a talk, and you can really improve skills other than your technical skills in I think in a culture like that. And again, I think you added to that culture and that kind of thinking.
Yeah, it was great. It was good fun. It was enjoyable. I think it was success at a personal level, a professional level. I think we constantly kept evaluating what I was doing as a non-exec. Was relationship working for you? Was the focus? Were you getting the advice you needed? As we talked about latterly, the broader, wider impact. I think it worked really well, and hopefully, it's a role which I've enjoyed and subsequently gone on to have kind of 3 or 4 more roles. And I think I've identified the sort of relationship and the kind of involvement I want from working for you. So I think it does go right back to the beginning. It starts about with the personal relationship. There's got to be rapport. There's got to be respect. There's got to be trust, openness, being comfortable to share vulnerability. Because otherwise it's just a waste of everyone's time, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point. And I guess my final comment on this, really, just going off what you said there, is it is all about finding the right person. So you shouldn't rush into that. And in reality, Ian, we work with a few external consultants, and it was that's how we engaged with you to begin with. And it just so happened the relationship built from there. And at the end, it was a funded kind of consultancy from a government scheme. But at the end of it, we felt that there was huge value for that relationship to continue. So we then made it a commercial one. Eventually you became a shareholder, you bought into the company, you showed your faith in what we were doing, and we reciprocated that as well, I believe, and it worked really well. But it's not something you should rush into. It will take time to develop that relationship, and actually in reality you might have to kiss a couple of frogs first before you find the right person. Going back to your relationship analogy, Ian, Tinder doesn't always work, does it? So
tell me. Yeah, I think it's a good point to kind of wrap up, really. I think, again, one of the things we're looking to help with these podcasts is to share our experience. So I think hopefully, we've explained enough about how we started, how we worked, and where we are today, that anyone else, any other founder in a startup or an SME that's thinking about the value of Non-Exec, me and Guy would be more than happy to talk to you. If the content's been relevant and useful, then come to tsf.tech and we'll have a brew and just talk to you about the qualities of Non-Exec and how that can benefit your business.
Right, so I think that's enough for this week, chaps. Thank you very much. I think next week, Ian, are you talking to John Davidge?
Yes, I'm going to talk about legals, which is a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting, and really, really important. And John's a great character as well as a great trusted advisor. So, really valuable insights on the legal framework of starting your company.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.